All right, welcome, folks. Welcome. Happy Monday. This is an impromptu Kamkunji impromptu gathering today, right here on Conversations with TopDonn. There is a very important topic that has come up that we felt the need that we needed to address immediately, and that is the current Diaspora Voter Registration that is ongoing in 3 consulates in Washington, D.C. We have it ongoing in New York City, and we also have it ongoing at the consulate in Los Angeles. Joining us on the panel today to discuss kind of the updates for it, I have Mr. Symon Ogeto from Chicago from Seed Group. Karibu, Symon.
Thank you.
And joining us from Washington, D.C. is one of the hosts of the OneMic Show that takes place Fridays from Washington, D.C., Ali. Karibu.
Asante sana, TopDonn.
All right, this is our impromptu kamkunji. You know, usually when you're having a kamkunji, you go under the mugumo tree and you sit, and people gather around and discuss when there is kind of like an important issue that has come up. So, this one, Ali, you brought up yesterday in terms of your thoughts as to number one, why Kenyans are not registering in the numbers probably expected at the various consulates, and in your regards, it's in Washington D.C. And I responded to that post you had put up with the idea that this needed to get addressed on multiple platforms, and thankfully you had done that on your own platform as well. Individually here in Chicago, myself and Symon, we had a discussion about this very issue, and had many thoughts on, number one, the process as to what happened in terms of selecting those 3 locations that are currently being used for the diaspora registration. Because a lot of people, I mean, we're here in Chicago. You have the opportunity. You're lucky that you live in Washington, D.C., and were able to actually go through the process, and I'm sure you'll detail that out for us. So let's begin there, because, I mean, the biggest stake for us here was that why those 3 locations, and why the short notice, right? Real quick, I'll put up the flyer that was sent out about I think it's about 12 days ago now, right? This is the flyer that did the rounds right here in the U.S., right? So Diaspora Register to Vote registration dates from January 17th to January 21st. Location centers, as we have mentioned, Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles. Then you've got Berlin and London, right? So those are the ones that were listed there. So I think, Ali, you this particular weekend, this past week, you had a chance to speak to one of the IEBC commissioners that is here for the exercise. What were their thoughts in terms of the locations that have been chosen for this particular exercise?
So when it comes to, the IBC team that came here, they're stuck up on legalese, which they're bound by the law. You can't blame them for that. And the main reason those locations were selected was primarily because that's where the law allows. Those embassies and consulates are the only places that have been gazetted by Parliament to be able to host registration and voting in the diaspora. So they don't have any legal authority to take it anywhere else. So these locations were not chosen based on the areas where most Kenyans are. They are not chosen based on, proximity or anything. They are simply chosen based on legally. These are the only places where IEBC could register people, and that's the main reason these locations were chosen. And of course, we know, these locations are not the locations where we have the most Kenyans in the United States. I guess, everyone knows, it's places like Dallas, Boston, Atlanta, but those were the main reasons why the locations were chosen. Don.
Okay, Symon, what are your initial thoughts on this? Because we had this conversation literally the day that the flyer came out. I called Ogeto right away and I said, what do you think about the locations listed? And Ali, I told you yesterday that when we posted the information, I was literally laughed out of a couple of groups saying, you're giving me this information on January 7th, expecting me to drag my family to, say, from Minnesota to go to Washington, D.C. to go register. So, Symon, what were your thoughts on that?
Don, thank you so much for having me on the show. very, very thankful for the opportunity to discuss this very important matter, which in many ways leverages on Kenya's Kenyan sovereign right to actually vote. As you know, being in the United States, you understand the power of voting. And it's unfortunate that I never had a chance of voting in my own birthplace, Kenya. And even at the diaspora level, I'm still not in a position to actually exercise that right with the dual citizenship. So I'm just going to give you context on how I understand, based on my working with the Kenyan government, not as an official, but interacting with them over the years of my being in the United States. One is that IBC is an independent entity from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's an agency of Kenyan government, but they don't seem to work, or they have not devised a way of working closely together, because it's a new kind of beast in the house. So they really don't know how to go about it. And if you understand, the embassies are really made up of a conglomerate of different ministries, like Ministry of Home Affairs or Register of Persons, Immigration. They send their person there. The commercial attaché is sent by the Minister of Trade. Then the Attorney General sends in their counsel. So they're actually different pieces of the Kenyan government that end up making the embassy function. And then the president, of course, appoints the ambassador who oversees everything. So so just to explain, is the IBC's first dips in kind of being part of the embassy setup. That is probably a reason why they probably took a long time to figure out how do we get to engage the embassy. And then they ran out in this interesting, I call it intergovernmental setup, whereby Kenya cannot operate outside the embassies. They can't come over and suddenly set shop in Chicago and all these other places. They have to go through the State Department. In fact, most government officials normally travel under the mandate of the embassy. The same way the US embassy cannot send its ambassador to the village, they have to go through the Minister of Foreign Affairs to actually authorize that. So that explains to you the complexity from a government standpoint that wananchi don't know about, okay? And then two, I also realized that there was a bit of probably disorganization or just not even thinking about it. I'm told that there was a case in court that provoked IBC to actually get to do this finally after almost 12 years since the constitution was passed to mandate that Kenyans throughout the world should be able to vote. So those things, when you kind of put them together, they explain you where we are right now. In terms of choice, I want to add on this. 2016, I believe, 2015, 2016, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through the embassy at the time, made a very aggressive effort to recruit honorary consuls. And I was one of the applicants, actually, from Chicago. They based their efforts on populations where we have a majority Kenyan. So they were going to appoint an honorary consul for Minnesota. They were going to appoint an honorary consul for Seattle, Texas, Chicago, and Atlanta. Okay, so this was going to be the first exercise, involving an appointment of a majority honorary consuls who actually happen to have Kenyan roots, either Kenyans or Kenyan roots. And apparently, they did send a contingent of interviewers to all these states, including Chicago. But then that process came to a dead end. No communication, nothing, everything just went quiet. I never even heard back in terms of what really happened, even though from the grapevine I would be told, oh, that process is still going on. It's actually on the mandate, it's on the hands of the ambassador to make those decisions, because honorary consuls are usually appointed from an ambassador level. So this would have really helped a lot in making this exercise meaningful, because as I realized, Canada, they did actually have registration at honorary council appointments, including the main consulate. So again, it just shows the dysfunction, if not the inability of government to work with its respective agencies. And so that's what pretty much what I could think is the basis behind what we're seeing currently happening.
I mean, thanks, Symon, for that. The numbers in terms of people who have registered have been quite dismal. We looked at them this morning together with Ali. I believe Washington D.C. had 98, which was the most. New York, Ali had 83. I don't remember how many people in LA had actually registered. And then you look at actually in Canada, a couple of places had not even opened up because of COVID protocols. So it's one of the things, and I think that touches to where Ogeto is going, is in terms of people really didn't even know this was happening. I mean, we have somebody that's watching, one of the viewers, Ronnie Mugaki, lives in Minneapolis, and he says, I live in Minneapolis and did not even know this was happening. And this has been happening time and again. So people who are plugged into the communities might know that it's happening, but there are very many people. I just did a spot check today, and almost 80 to 90% of the people I just called randomly. I said, do you know that there's registration going on? They had no idea about it. So we spoke about this yesterday, but Ali, in terms of getting actual trusted messengers to get this messaging out. So coming, for example, on this platform or coming on the OneMic platform that you have. And nobody was tasked to do this. This flyer just literally just came out of nowhere. When you spoke to the commissioner last week, I'm sure that you raised this up. Maybe you want to convey to our viewers what they actually said.
Yeah, so last week I had the privilege of speaking to the director of voter education. Her name is Joyce Ekwam, IEBC, and I was able to meet them. Because I went to register on the first day. We are some of the privileged people who live close to an embassy, and we're able to do that. So she was kind enough to come to our studio and break down, what was happening. But in my view, the biggest reason, why this uptick is not taking off. To me, it's not even the distance. I know a lot of people are looking at distance, but when you look at the grander scheme, even the locations where we have embassies, D.C., LA, New York, the numbers are still very, very paltry. Like D.C., for example, for the 10 days, it's an average of about 10 people a day coming to register. So to me, the biggest, the fatal error that IEBC made was doing this on the last minute. If this was done a bit earlier, if people were given ample notice, at least 3 months in advance, this would not, have happened. So the issue is not only logistics. To me, the bigger elephant in the room is the fact that this was announced very late. I left, we keep up, with all the announcements and everything. I left for Kenya on the 21st of December. And by that time, nothing had happened, So we went to Kenya. While I was in Kenya sometime in January is when this flyer popped up and an announcement came in. So we had been keeping tabs with IEBC. They had already announced that a couple of extra countries will be registered to vote, and US was one of them. The problem is that they had not announced the date. So initially, tentatively, they said that registration is going to happen in December. And I was a bit worried because in December is when most diaspora Kenyans who want to travel go to Kenya. But we never got any communication until January when the flyer popped up, I think about 10, 11 days before actual registration began. And that's where, people got wind of the information. So I will not, I will not go as far as blaming people in the diaspora because I know that's happening right now. But we are planners, people like knowing in advance, what's happening, taking days off. So as you say, Don, right now, there are people you're speaking to and they're telling you, even in the comments here, I see Ronnie saying, I live in Minnesota and I didn't even know this is happening. That's not Ronnie's fault. It's a fault of, the people who are supposed to relay the message. In this case, IEBC. You talked about trusted messengers. I have, since, this exercise started, I've interacted with a lot of IEBC officials. good people. But one thing they need to realize, if there's any commissioner out there listening to us, I want you to know that IEBC, in as much as they have the mandate to do this in the diaspora, they're not a trusted messenger. Let's just be honest, like because of the history, and the broken promises and just generally government, they're not a trusted messenger. The embassy, if you're listening, the embassy has tried to stay away from this because I think because IEBC is an independent body, but the embassy is also not a trusted messenger. What IEBC should have done, from the very beginning is be decisive on when this was going to happen, at least 3, 4, 5 months in advance. Figure out who are the trusted messengers and engage them. The other issue that I noticed with their team, there's none of them who's from here. When you go to IEBC teams back in Kenya, like in the different constituencies, in the different wards, they have locals, like to understand, certain intricate issues about those localities. So they don't have anyone as part of their team who lives here. And to me, I think that's a problem. They don't see it, but that's another big problem. So most of the staffers who came here from Nairobi, very professional, very good people. They want to get as many people as possible to register, but their messaging was just completely flawed. And that's the reason why the uptick is not going up. Don, back to you.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of points that we're going to bring. For me, I still want to go back to that logistics question. So you're mentioning when the flyer came out. This flyer came out on January 7th. I was keeping tabs on it as well. It came out on January 7th, again, through channels that typically are not any of the regular channels you would see are putting information out. Again, they're not trusted messengers. It's not the channels that you would see. The flyer just started, moving around on WhatsApp. So January 7th, the flyer comes out, and it says that registration is happening in D.C. on January 17th. So you're telling me to, giving me a 10-day window to plan myself to go to D.C. to register, after knowing about this process, and we had this conversation with Symon as well. This didn't come out of the blue. The Constitution was passed in 2010. The mandate for IEBC to get diaspora registration, this is the third election that they're getting this mandate. And then you all of a sudden come up and give us a 10-day window. To me, it looks like they literally didn't want us to be part of this process. And I would have told the commissioner if he or she was here on the show. And by the way, just for to be really clear, we invited a couple of the commissioners onto the show today. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it. But we would have told them that as well, is because it's, I'll put it in a way for us to understand easily. It literally is a slap in the face of the diasporans to be as shoddy as they were with their planning and expect us to up and leave and go and register. It really is shambolic to no end, and that's very unfortunate. Symon, thoughts on that?
Well, Don, you're very direct. Directness is actually a very good thing, because we come from a culture that is not direct. It doesn't tell people exactly what's happening. I remember when we had the very first commissioner who made several trips, actually the chairman of IEBC prior to Chebukati, and the diaspora has been knocking on the door of IEBC. We want to vote. We want to vote. 2013, the diaspora wanted to vote. 2016, the diaspora wanted to vote in 2017 elections. Now we are approaching 2022 elections in less than, 7 months? And then 2 weeks are given for the diaspora to register. How unfortunate. How unfortunate. Unfortunate in the sense that IBC, working closely with the embassy, would have told each other that the United States is a vast continent, okay? For anybody to fly from Seattle to Washington, D.C. or Los Angeles or New York, it takes a fortune, okay? They have really appreciated the fact that the diaspora has been sending big money back home. But that's not the kind of money we have to ferry ourselves to D.C. or New York or Los Angeles for a process that is not going to deliver. One, a lot of folks in the diaspora do not have passports. Kenya is about to phase out the old passports, and then they require that you have to go to the embassy or consulate to get your fingerprints taken, so to be able to get your passport. So the passport is one document that is required to register as a voter. So if somebody has an invalid passport, that means even if they went there, they won't be able to get the passport within a day in order for them to register for IBC, in order to vote. So those two things are totally disjointed. In fact, if the embassy was consulted, they would have told IBC that, guys, this effort is not going to pay off because folks are having problems registered coming to DC to actually get their passports taken care of. You see the point? And then now when this effort was unveiled just the beginning of January and then given 2 weeks to make this process happen, like you say, it's a slap in the face, but it also betrays the government in its ability to plan ahead, because at the end of the day, those dollars that will be spent on accommodating these innocent IBC officials for these 2 weeks they have been in the United States. I believe the exercise concluded today. Hotel accommodation, food, then they are getting paid an honorarium for being away from the country. At the end of the day, they're gonna go ahead and say we spend $2 million US for this exercise, and the diaspora didn't come out to do what? Register. But the point is, the diaspora would have told you, don't waste that money. In fact, save it for 2027. But begin the exercise now. They should have begun this effort 2017 or 2018. By now, the diaspora has had a clustering already done to indicate where the Kenyans are all over the United States, a majority of them. Kenyans in the diaspora would have helped to be able to tell IBC that if you're sending your folks over there, actually either ask for volunteers or hire the locals who understand what's going on. IBC would have been told by the embassy that in our efforts to reach Kenyans, this is what we do in order to engage them in one way or another. So all these pieces really present a problem. But I want to offer a constructive solution. That is, yes, this exercise has happened. I hope that they don't waste any resources moving forward, but take this as a learning process. We want them to know that the diaspora is always ready and wanting to be engaged in order to provide tangible results. But those bricks that Ali has talked about, the trust issue, they will start from that point. If you have 5 years to build trust with somebody, you're going to make a dent. May not come 100%, but you make a dent. And we have different stories and efforts that the embassy has made, straight from the ambassador all the way down in terms of connecting with people. Don, you remember we went to DC for 2 years in a row for conferences, which were actually meant to build bridges between the diaspora and the embassy. And the result was astounding. I remember sitting in a hotel in DC and feeling very special as a Kenyan, because for the first time I was like, wow, you mean if Kenyan government can host me for a dinner or a lunch, and I feel very special. But those efforts should not be done depending on who is the ambassador in Washington. It should be efforts that should be passed on. Whoever is coming to DC next after Ambassador Amayo should continue the efforts Ambassador Amayo has already started in building bridges with the diaspora. So these efforts then should be passed on to IBC. The same thing with any other agency that has interest in the diaspora, including KRA. There's so many agencies that really need the input of the diaspora, or the diaspora needs them in order to actually have some level of functionality and efficiency.
Very good point, Symon. Yeah, I wanted to bring up a couple of comments here. One comment here from Charles, and thank you, by the way, if you're watching. This is a special edition of Conversations with TopDonn. We're usually here on Thursdays, but today was a special Kamkunji dealing with the ongoing voter registration taking place in the consulates around the U.S. Charles, thank you for watching. Charles says the bigger issue here is the fact that not only was this done hurriedly and secretly, but it was but the fact that there is totally no reason why we are being given a short period to register. This is something that we have been asking for many years, but when you just give us a few days and short notice, and then we're expected to make travel arrangements to get to all these far-flung places, when even the weather can cause flight cancellation. So this deals directly to the heart of that logistics issue that we're kind of talking about. And also one thing that you mentioned that I heard quite a bit, Ogeto, and I will put up the initial flyer that we had, is if you see here, valid passport required to register. I mean, that is an absolute humongous sticking point for very many people, because to get your new passport, you first of all have to go to D.C. and you have to wait. The appointments themselves right now, if you look, appointments are all the way up through to August. So how are you supposed to register if all of a sudden these people come on January 7th and say, come and register without you having a passport? It's shambolic. It's quite shambolic. But that's a story for another time, I guess.
Now you see, Don, there's actually a ruling, and this I just saw on Twitter. So don't quote me on this. I saw on Jerotich is an activist in Kenya. They've taken a lot of cases to court. And this issue of diasporans not being allowed to use their national ID was brought up. And according to her Twitter handle, she says that the courts have ruled that people in the diaspora are allowed to use IDs. So this passport requirement is something that was implemented by IBC. I personally, felt that it was going to create legal problems, because I'm also looking at this from a legal perspective. When you consider right now getting your passport, if you applied for your passport in November 2021, you probably have your appointment for biometrics in November 2022, which is after the elections. So that right there affects, an election that's supposed to be free and fair, to everyone who wants to vote. And to me, that is a big sticking point. And here's my recommendation to IBC if you're listening to me right now. So this process is supposed to end this coming Friday, February the 4th. My recommendation, because if they were going to extend it, they should have done it earlier, because I was expecting maybe them to extend it. If they do it last minute, that again is going to go against the diaspora ethos of people planning and people being able to go out. So I think they should look for another window within which they're still allowed to register people. Take it a bit out, maybe mid-April after, but change your tact altogether. Tell people in advance, we're going to open another 3-week window here, and this is what you need to do. Give people some time to prepare, because the thing about the logistics is that legally, they can't, right now as we speak, they can't set up a registration center in Minnesota because the law currently only allows them to do it in embassies and consulates. And one other thing I'd like to say before we get to you, Ogeto, is that despite all this, I highly recommend people, especially who are close to the consulates and the embassies, I highly recommend you go register. And the reason why I say this is because there's only one language that our government understands. They only understand the language of numbers. I mean, we've been dealt with a bad deal here, but we have to make we have to make use of what we have now in order to get what we want. Even the act of voting, this is something that we've been fighting for from the first election after the promulgation in 2013. It's happening, to the third election cycle. So the sausage making process of the Kenyan government is not easy. And unless we overwhelm them with numbers, we are going to find ourselves again in the same position we are. So people who live in D.C., in LA, and in New York, and in all other stations around the world where they're registering people, please try your best to go and just rack up those numbers so that we can get registration centers for people in other places like Minneapolis, New Jersey, and so many other places. Ogeto.
Well, thank you so much, Ali, that's a very constructive advice to IBC, and I hope they are listening. What I told Don earlier was we create the laws. The Kenyan Parliament creates these laws. The same Parliament can go back and pass a special legislation that permits for the diaspora to actually vote outside consulates, like have a mobile, because the embassy has provided services actually in a mobile sense. They have come to Chicago and been able to register Kenyans to get IDs, something right now which I think that process should be ongoing. And if indeed the courts in Kenya did pass, authorize, or mandate that Kenyans should be able to register as voters using their national identity cards, I promise you that between tomorrow and the 4th, Friday, those numbers will double if not triple. There is a problem we have in terms of getting the passports in time to be used for this exercise. Finally, I hope that the IBC will come back in May, use this opportunity after they've done these exercises and seen the numbers that have come out and the feedback they will get. Go back, get organized. And I know a lot had to do with budgetary constraints. To have people here longer than 2 weeks could have been a huge strain on their budget. But it will be worth it for them to come back for 2 weeks in May and be able to get at least 60% of the diaspora, if not 70% of the diaspora, where they will use between now and then building those bridges, being able to create a relationship of trust, being able to pass out information to ensure that the stakeholders in every community get to know that this exercise is happening, is actually taking place. And I agree with Ali that, yes, if those numbers are not there, somebody's going to go in Parliament and say, why should we waste $2 million? And these boys and girls don't show up. They think they're that special and throw that in the garbage can. They say that we don't have to do this anymore. No, I do understand where you're coming from, that people need to register. I beseech the same, that those who have the credentials to register create time to actually go ahead and make this exercise possible. And I hope that IBC is efficient enough to register people quickly. You know, one thing people don't have a lot is time. If somebody has to come to the embassy and wait for 2-3 hours for an exercise that should last 10 minutes, more than likely we won't have a lot of people. So they have to create a great deal of synergy in terms of this is a very quick process. You've seen the efforts which are being done about people getting vaccinated in these United States, or you've seen how many commercials are running on TV for that very exercise. And it's not been easy either. It's taken probably 2.5 years to get 60-70% of Americans vaccinated, not all of them. And we also know IBC is not going to capture everybody, but this effort of educating people, of getting the word out, of getting people to understand why this is important should begin now, should be ongoing. And IBC needs to become a close ally of Kenya's missions abroad, worldwide.
Right, thanks, Ogeto. Yes, and thanks, folks, if you're watching. We really want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you're out there watching, we know it's a Monday, share the link, comment in the comments, because we are going to forward this as actual feedback back to IBC. I'm going to read out a couple of comments that have come out that kind of touch on what we're talking about. So Vince says, do you think IEBC will have another run around so we can register to vote? from Trimex Transportation. He says, what law is it that requires a passport to register? And then Godi says that we should be demanding for a seamless process before we even start voter registrations. This exercise is all but a sham and a cash cow for a select few. And that goes to one of the things that the very first time this came out, that was my biggest concern, because this should, the procurement process or how they were dealing with this should have been public information. As it is, IEBC is funded by Kenyan taxpayers, and there was no information as to how this was being funded, any of that sort of thing. So, and Symon just talked about it. So when they go back to Kenya and say, well, we were in D.C. and Los Angeles and New York, and we did registration, then it cost $2 million. Yeah, sure it did. I mean, where is the accountability going to be if we on the ground here are not even involved? So, I mean, very, very, very many sore points, but I will want to echo that despite this, it is still essential if you're close to the areas where registration is taking place, whether you're in D.C., if you're in New York or in Los Angeles, give it a shot. Go register and see where it goes. And I think that brings me to the next point, because Ali, you yourself actually went to register. What do you want to tell us about how the process went for you?
So the process is very smooth. It's very clean. It's very fast. I commend, the IBC officials in how they conducted it. They will collect some of the information. There's a lot of, writing, karatasi na kalam, biro pen, and I think they're doing that because of where we came from in 2007. The new systems we have are informed by the mistrust that was there before. So whatever they're typing in, you actually have to write it down on paper first, and then someone will key it in, and then they collect your biometrics and the information on your passport. It took me, between waiting and being processed, it took me no more than 20 minutes. So the traffic is very minimal. So anyone who's around, just walk in, and they're open on weekends too, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So there's a lot of some kind of misinformation going on around, or maybe just people assuming that they're not open on weekends. They're open on weekends. So the people who are closed, I highly recommend, just go and register. To me, the important thing is that once this process has started, I know, there's someone who commented and felt like this should never have started. The good thing about starting something is that it can never be taken away. It's very difficult for IBC to come 2027 and say, you know what, DC, we didn't like how many people registered, we're taking this away from you. This now cannot be taken away from us. It's not where we want it, but we can get to where we need it to be. Now, another, statement that Symon made, about IBC coming here in May. And I think we need to go back and look at the laws. I think the registers have to be closed completely. They have to be shut 90 days before the elections. And if I'm not correct, anybody feel free to check and correct me. But if my memory serves me right, 90 days before August 9th, those registers have to be shut. And counting 90 days from August 9th, we are talking about the 9th of May. So I think the last window that IBC will have for them to comfortably get to register people, because they have to register people and then they have to verify, so that you don't show up in a polling station and you're told that your name is missing on the voter rolls. So April, to me, April is the ideal time. Is the ideal time that they could come, they could announce early enough, come back a second round, and just change tact altogether. Use trusted messengers. TopDonn, you've promoted, events in places like Las Vegas, in Chicago, big events like the Chicago Marathon. And we've seen, how early you guys come out to start doing that and sensitizing people. Remember years ago when we came up with the idea of Twende Study? It was a very simple idea for just people who go to Las Vegas to watch Kenyan rugby to go to the stadium. It was a very simple idea, but we pushed it. Quite a number of people overwhelmed social media timelines, and people responded to it, and people were able to take action, because the most important thing when you're sending out communication is for people to take action. When you're putting out a flyer 10 days before and people are up against the wall and they can't take action, you really can't blame the people. You know, like I know we have to personally also take responsibility, especially those of us who live in the localities of the embassies and consulates. But it's really not easy for anyone to lay blame on our people when this was done hurriedly. So my advice to IEBC, if you're listening, you know, like this was a very important exercise where you've learned from your mistakes. I hope we're going to get many more people registered in these last days, but give us another window. And I promise you, you'll get way more people than you're getting right now. Don.
Let's switch tack to what they would actually do differently. IEBC would do differently if they came the next time. One of the biggest things that we've talked about was in terms of going to where the people actually are. So we've talked about, you know, places like Minneapolis, Seattle, Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, up and down Kenya. So it would take an act of parliament to be able to change it so that those locations could be used. That's one. Secondly, and we had this discussion offline with Ogeto, is all this information that they are requesting from us, they actually have. Ogeto gave a very good example in the two regimes before when we had a different ambassador. The name escapes me right now. They had road shows in, Odembo, thank you.
Yeah.
They had road shows in, I believe, 8 cities where they went. They collected people's biometrics, they got details, they got IDs. Even my ID, my Kenyan ID that is valid till today, I got at that exercise. I believe Ogeto, the number of people registered here in Chicago was in about 208 or so, right? Here, something in that range. The information that they're requesting from us, they actually have. You already have most of that information. Why do we need to follow the same analog processes that they follow in Kenya? Well, there are very many other ways to increase efficiencies that can increase participation in the process. It doesn't have to be the same. Whether it was an act of parliament said you have to come and register, it doesn't apply across the board. So if IEBC are going to come back the next time, we, you know, after this show is done, maybe we'll get some recommendations for them and say, if you want to come back and be successful, there are certain criteria that you need to use. Right? Advanced noticing, using trusted messengers, things like that, not just showing up. And this is the reason why it hasn't worked for them.
You know what? Angalia, I have a one-shot solution which has actually been already initiated by the Kenyan government. The e-citizen is a one-stop. In fact, that's what it does. I just looked at the website and it says it's a one-stop for all government services. We trust this avenue. Kenyans in Kenya are using it. We're using it here to apply for driver's licenses, a visa, passport. That's what we're using. IEBC needs to have a portal right there. When you use your login, you should go to IEBC and tell them where you are, right from your house. If they put out such a word out, they used every conceivable media avenue. Kenyans in the diaspora worldwide will go ahead and tell them where they are. Okay, that's one step. This will give a premise to be able to establish whether there is a need for legislation which Parliament will be able to pass to allow for this constituent to really participate in this very constitutional mandate. I mean, that's visible. Don, you and I were talking earlier. There are smaller countries than Kenya that actually do online voting. Yes, Kenya is very skeptical about doing that because of Kuiba Kura. So just to begin the whole process, establish where your people are using a very established government avenue such as e-citizen. .go.ke. IEBC should have a portal right there between now and April to be able to let the diaspora know if you didn't register to vote, we need to know where you are. Here's the first process. If they realize that they have about 200,000 300,000 or 1 million people in North America, then the next steps will follow for this exercise to happen. And even if it doesn't come to fruition, this effort should never always come up when we are really close. And then when elections are done, everything goes to a back burner. We wait for another election to come. Since when are we going to be, a community of people of continuity? Our kids don't stop growing after election. No, we don't stop growing ourselves. So this is an effort which I believe we're going to, will benefit both the diaspora, the Kenyan government, and the people of Kenya. As you've realized, we are all interconnected. If the diaspora has this big lake of a stool, then the Kenyans in Kenya are the second leg, and the Kenyan government is the third leg. We need each other in order to coexist and be this dynamic country or leader we want to be as a nation.
All right. Thanks, Symon. I'm going to put up a comment here from Godi. So Godi says that when the study was a unifying event and it ran for over 3 months, the Kenyan government/consulate was never a part of it. Politics is unfortunately not a unifier. So Ali, we spoke about this yesterday, and actually that the Go Study initiative was one of your initiatives, and the way that it ended up getting pushed was, getting what we call trusted messengers, which being here stateside, being involved in very many things. One of the things that we do is either concert or event promotion, and we did it in Las Vegas, whereby all of the promoters involved in shows in Las Vegas ended up having one unified message, which was the Twende Study message, which essentially was, we are here to support the Kenya team playing rugby. So regardless of which camp affiliation you're with or what party you're promoting, the one event that's going to get us unified is actually going to the stadium. And that event was, that messaging was very successful because of that one uniform platform. So something like online or voter registration should have followed that pattern, whereby it's like, hey, we've got Ali. If I go to a particular city, say I go to Atlanta, I know who the promoters are there. I will get them to promote. If you come to Chicago, you can get a hold of me. I will definitely chip in and promote. So those sorts of things were not done. And if they don't do the actual reach out, outreach to the trusted messengers here stateside, it's not going to succeed. So I'm not sure how they'll address that, or maybe if you ask that question, maybe Ali, you want to tackle this.
Well, there's no, IBC, first of all, the first thing they have to realize, and I'm being very candid with them, I've interacted with a lot of them, they have to realize that they're not a trusted messenger. And the faster they realize this, the easier it will be for them to spread the message out here. They have to build that trust. Another thing I also want Kenyans to realize out here in the diaspora, in as much as we send so much money, in as much as, we're a big part of the economy, you have to understand that we are in this by ourselves. People in Kenya, most people in Kenya you talk to, they don't want us to participate in this process. A lot of people in Kenya did not want the dual citizenship. And now when I say people in Kenya, I'm even going to our parliament, because parliament is a representation of the people across the board in Kenya. Members of parliament right now, I know we simplify and we say, we are the ones who pass the laws, we should pass a law. Members of parliament, as constituted right now, have no incentive to come and push a diaspora agenda in parliament. I'm talking about even members of parliament who are previously living here in the diaspora, because they're representing a constituency and they have other priorities. So we are in this by ourselves. IBC dragged its feet for so many years to get here. And to a certain extent, it's kind of feeling like they're here because the law requires them to be here, but they'd rather not be. They'd rather not be here. Now, another dynamic that also a lot of people don't know is that the way IBC is funded, it's funded, by the legislative branch of the government. And I think that's part of the reason why there was delay and reluctance for them to announce that they're going to register people here. It may have been a money issue, but of course, you know, like they did what they had to do. But of course, this exercise has not turned out, you know, like as they expected. So the first thing that they need to do for this particular election cycle, you know, because I'm looking at this election cycle, all these suggestions are coming are good, you know, for the next election cycle. So I'm a realist. You know, online voter registration is not going to come for this particular cycle. Mail-in voting is not going to come for this particular cycle. We are not going to get new polling stations for this particular cycle. You know, that has to go through a very, you know, like grinding sausage making process through the Kenyan parliament. But the question is, what can be done right now to salvage, you know, like the shambolic registration numbers? Open up another window sometime in April, you know, change your tact. Understand as IBC, please, we love you IBC, but you're not a trusted messenger. You know, like it may be the people who came before you and I'm speaking specifically for the Kenyan diaspora in the US. You are not a trusted messenger. So change your tact. Talk to us. We'll get you to the trusted messengers and we'll get to the people. And I promise you, IBC, you will get more people. And then, of course, there was the court ruling that I talked about today. I haven't verified it, but it's on Twitter that the courts have determined that Kenyans in the diaspora can use their national IDs to register. I think IEBC needs to implement that immediately because there are so many Kenyans out here who wanted to get their passports, but they don't have their new passport simply because it's stuck in the process. You know, we know that, you know, like there's been a very big backlog on passports. So there's been some sort of unfairness in all this. So IBC, if you're listening to me, please implement what we're telling you, and I promise you, you won't regret.
Symon, go ahead.
Well, I would just put it this way. You know, it's not a trusted messenger, but we have to work with them because we need them. The Kenyan government, you need it for whatever reason, whether it's getting your passport processed or getting a visa, you're going home. You know, governments have never been able to secure trust 100%, but I call it unnecessary evil. For that reason, what I recommended must begin now, where there is data collection. IBC need to have the data of its people worldwide. That process should not wait for another cycle. It should start now and continue post August 9th. What I've always questioned time and again is this euphoria that comes up because there's a moment in waiting. And then when that moment comes and goes, people pack up and go back and sit and wait for another 5 years. IBC should have a division, a diaspora division that is active for the duration of an election cycle, because that's how long it's going to take to prepare the diaspora to effectively participate in Kenya's affairs. Number two, Kenyans in the diaspora, you've always realized everything you have to fight for it. So it needs to mobilize to actually do grassroots advocacy in Kenya's parliament. I remember that happened for the dual citizenship effort. So Kenyans may need to understand clearly what is at stake so that before those parliamentarians go voting for other things, this is one other thing they have to actually pass and vote. Including, I don't honestly think it's rocket science to have electronic voting from the diaspora aspect, because our numbers are not going to make a president. So if Kenya wants to take a risk, we are a very safe risk to take on, the diaspora. Let's try this thing. If it works with the diaspora, maybe we can try it at home, because those tyranny of numbers at home would make a huge difference. So it does not cost Kenya a thing. In fact, we'll put even our own resources to help that effort, where they can actually start even a simulation exercise to see how that kind of works with a lot of help and expertise. from here. So I don't want to water down the fact, yes, we may not be able to get people voting on August 9th, but this effort should take precedent now while it's hard, so you can get people can actually continue this process beyond. This continuity is an issue across the board, but we, the diaspora, are actually asking for it. We want to be on a project. It may last for 10 years, but if 10 years can produce a lasting impact, then so be it. If IBC is listening, that's what I want them to take home. If a new chairman is coming, he needs to pick up where Chebukati has begun. If there are new commissioners coming in, they need to be able to be given a file of the diaspora. Where did they stop? This business of us starting all over square one, every 5 years, square one, every 5 years, we'll never get up anywhere. That's where people are sitting at home and they're like, forget it. What's my vote gonna do? Because moreover, they're gonna count it. Yet, these very ordinary Kenyans have to pay for their ticket or ride their bus to go to DC. We put in so much of our own capital for an exercise that should be given special consideration with efficiency. And I'm glad you've just said that IBC seems to have a very smooth process. And likely it's because there aren't so many people showing up. But that's a good step. People knowing that this process doesn't last for long is a very good message, which is going to buy that trust building.
Now, another thing, John, real quick. Sorry not to interrupt you, but my advice also to those Kenyans who are tuned in, the horses that you support, because we know that most Kenyans out here have a horse in the race. So these horses that you support, they are very powerful. The two top horses, if you have connections to them or to their top campaigners, tell them to talk about this. Tell them to talk about this because they are the ones who can mobilize parliament. You saw they recently passed, a political parties act, this one for coalitions, it was passed very fast, Parliament right now is whipped, is totally whipped. So if you can talk to your horses, I'm not going to tell you which horse to talk to, but if you can talk to your horses and tell them that we have an emergency here and make them go on a public forum and talk about this. I'm telling you something, IBC is very responsive to that. They're going to do something about it. IBC, make sure that you're engaging with trusted messengers. And then we also have to figure out internally ourselves here in the diaspora, how we're going to keep people engaged, in civics, in civic education, how we're going to keep engaged after election. Because there tends to be some excitement that comes, right before an election, and then slightly after the election, and then people go about their businesses. We have to figure out how to engage, and we also have to figure out how to involve our children. Guess what? I am not seeing 20-something-year-olds involved in this. They probably don't know, and those who do, they probably don't care because they've not been engaged. They've not been engaged probably by their parents. They've not been engaged, by the communities, these so-called diaspora organizations, and I'm part of some of them. And these are some of the organizations that IBC connected with, they've done a very good job in, interfacing with IBC and pushing them. But let's be honest, they don't have reach. Their reach is on WhatsApp. They don't have reach. We know the people who have reach. You have to start connecting with the younger Kenyans, because if you don't, you're going to totally lose them. Try to talk to one of them. They'll either tell you, they don't know about it. And even if they do, they'll ask you why they need to do it. And this is because there's been no proper engagement to make them understand where all this came from. Don.
That's a very good point, Ali. The messaging to the younger folks, the people who are 21, 22, when this flyer came out, even on even on the Embassy of Kenya's social media pages, which, yes, they're not affiliated because IEBC is an independent organization, but the exercises were taking place at their locations. Plus, part of their job as a Kenyan embassy is civic education and educating the Kenyans. There was a comment here from Vince saying the only way that he knew that registration is taking place right now is because we went live today. I mean, what does that say to the process? That makes the process just kind of a sham. And even them themselves, the flyer that they put out, this flyer that we've put out a couple of times, that flyer went around on WhatsApp groups, various WhatsApp groups. As much as, yes, people are in WhatsApp groups, we're looking at what you've talked about, Ali, which is the younger folks. If that thing is not put out on TikTok, if it's not out on Instagram, if it's not being shared on other social media sites for the younger folks, and yes, they're just as Kenyan, as much Kenyan as we are, they're not going to engage in the process. That's one of the feedback items that I got. Another one I've seen a lot in the chat here in the comments, and I'll put up Nixon's comment is, we trust M-Pesa with our money, but cannot trust online voting. Yikes! Which for me is actually true. This whole idea that online voting is going to be unsecure, like, dude, Kenyans are sharp people. Some of the very best engineers, software engineers that you have working at these top companies are Kenyans. So don't tell me that we are not able to figure this out. It is not rocket science, my friend. So all that stuff, all those kind of barriers that they tend to try to put to us, to me, is just, again, another hurdle that is put in front of us that shouldn't be here. The issue of data being having to go and do registration again, that's just a cop-out to me. That's an excuse. And, hopefully we'll be able to get these recommendations. And thank you, people, for participating as well and giving recommendations that we can actually push back and say, no, this is what you need to do to be successful here. The terrain is not the same. Terrain ya Kenya sio terrain ya hapa. It is different, and trust the people on this end to tell you how to be successful. Ogeto, go ahead. We're coming up. Actually, we're already past the hour. Time has kind of flown. So, some recommendations. Ogeto, some final thoughts here that you think should be packaged to IEBC to be able to move forward and be successful if they do this operation again.
Ali has actually said some very, very important points, which I hope IEBC was listening. Now, I also do understand that. We are seeking the ability to vote from the diaspora. Yet, folks in Kenya, voting is a luxury because they don't even have the opportunity to do it. They don't have the resources to even go ahead and get a national ID. So, yes, it could be a luxury across the board, but until it becomes a need, it's a luxury. So, if the diaspora can actually muscle some efforts to just be able to vote, whether their votes count or they don't, that's one leg forward, one leg up, and a step forward. One thing that I don't know why, but I need to probably see some legal work. In Kenya, having a national ID is actually more important than having a passport, because that's what makes you a Kenyan. So I don't understand how this flipped to then get IEBC requiring a passport in order to register. In fact, anybody who's in Kenya, all they need is a national ID, which you get at the age of 18. In fact, in Kenya, having a birth certificate does not make you a Kenyan. It's a national ID that makes you a Kenyan, which technically makes you a voter. That's the message they should have come with here in the diaspora. To say, if you have a national ID, come over and vote. The numbers would have been different. And the effort that the embassy began, and God bless Evelyn Cheluget, who actually spearheaded the efforts as an immigration attaché when she was here. This effort should be revived by the embassy. Put some resources behind it and continue getting people getting the new ID, because that ID will actually take us places in this effort IEBC is trying to spearhead. So if they come back in April, let the IDs be the basis to actually register to vote. The passport should be secondary. And then it's a catch-22 with the passport, because the current passports are supposed to expire, I believe, end of the year. They were supposed to have expired 2 years ago. So that process in itself will not enable IEBC get the numbers they are looking for. And it's a huge governmental handicap, which should not translate into wananchi here at the diaspora. Finally, I'm hoping that the partnership we ourselves here in the diaspora have developed is vibrant enough to deserve a look by any agency from Kenya that wants to do business with the diaspora or carry out any effort. There is a great level of synergy that Kenyans throughout the United States have developed, all throughout in the diaspora. I'm part of an organization that is based in the UK, and we're able to connect with folks in Australia. We're able to connect with folks in Brazil. So this network should not be overlooked by any government agency in its ability to either get services from us or want us, to participate in any given effort. So those partnerships are very, very important. Maybe it's about time IBC considered having diaspora recruits to be able to help them in this effort. Since it's here to stay, you can as well go ahead and hire people who are in the diaspora to work with you in order to make things work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ogeto. Ali, is your mic back on?
Yeah, my battery, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah. So basically, what I have to say is that, Ogeto summarized most of the points, but IBC needs to understand, what they're dealing with and the reality of what we currently have. They need to, if they want to salvage this process, they just need to swallow their pride and understand that one of the main reasons, the biggest reason, I know there's logistics and everything, but to me, the biggest reason was the time. Had they given people advance notice, I'm sure there are people who are willing to travel, who could have made plans. But because this notice was so short, it was kind of like a slap in the face, for most people, even most people who are finding out right now, they're like, okay, what exactly is going on? And even more important, engage the younger folks. The diaspora groups that are engaging IBC, most of these diaspora groups are not engaging younger people. And they're also not engaging, people who they feel like are in the entertainment segment. But whether you like it or not, those are the people with the widest reach. They have a wider reach than pastors. They have a wider reach than, these traditional organizations that we've had here. So we have to start coming and working together. So my hope is that something is done to salvage this. And we also need to figure out ourselves within the diaspora, how are we gonna keep engaged, once voting is over, because there might possibly be a referendum. That's something that people are not talking about right now. But word has it, some of these deals, I'm gonna get a bit into politics. Some of these deals that are being done right now by the two big coalitions, there's a deal to have a referendum. And you're hearing this for the first time over here. So this is just for people who are tuned in here today. You're hearing this for the first time here. We will possibly have a referendum before the end of 2022, very likely. And if it's not by the end of 2022, it will be early next year. And remember that diaspora is also allowed to vote in referenda. This referenda may involve amendments of the Constitution, so you definitely want to have your voice in there. So my final word is anybody who's in DC, who's in LA, who's in New York, just go register for the sake of the people who are living far, who can't do it. Because the only way our voice will be heard is once we register numbers. If we don't register number, right now a lot of people are annoyed, they're giving up. Guess what? All the people who are against the diaspora, that's exactly what they want. They want you to give up. They want you to say that, oh, I'm not going to register. And then they'll come back and say, oh, we gave them an opportunity, but they decided that they don't want it. So they want you to give up. They want you to be angry where you are. So you have to flip this script on them by overwhelming those registration centers. And I promise you, we are going to get what we want. We don't have, let's use what we want to get what we have done.
All right, good points, both Symon and Ali. I'm going to put up one last comment here before we go. It comes from Godi. Says, before we ask IEBC to come back for a second round of registration, we first need them to account for their first trip. We need transparency, but unfortunately, we won't get to see that. That's one of the at least biggest things for me is how are we going to keep IEBC accountable for what has taken place during this trip. I will tell you that they have been releasing the numbers, and we touched upon that right when we began the show in terms of the actual registration at the various centers that they have. I don't have it to put it up on screen, but I will tell you that they put up a daily total of people who have registered, which is actually what spurred this show today, was the extremely low uptake in registrations. I think New York 98, New York 83 people, and LA in the 60-70 range. So as has been communicated by Symon and by Ali, despite all the challenges, the best way to tackle this is if you're close to those centers, if you're close to D.C., LA, New York, go ahead and register. It takes 20 minutes or less, as was touched on by Ali, and then we'll go there. That's at least a first building block to where we think we should be able to get to. Ogeto, go ahead.
I'm going to ask IBC officials responsible for the diaspora registration to actually come on your show in the next time you're having this show, because them having this presence, regardless of where they are, we're in a Zoom world now. Mr. Jebukati can actually log in from Nairobi and be able to be on this show any time of day. These efforts are going to help IBC build a relationship than any other agency in the Kenyan government. So yes, we want people to go ahead and register. You are sleeping at home and you have all the credentials, go register. There's nothing that should hold people back from doing that. But I would like the officials of IBC responsible of this exercise to actually start showing up. There's no reason, if somebody right now is in a hotel watching this and should have been here, shame on you. You should have been able to actually be able to come in, because the point is, as you've realized, we are ordinary citizens. We are talking to each other. This is the kind of conversations which are going to deliver the results we want. We want people, we have been very responsible in our conversation, whether we are picking up a point or not. And the structure of communication too has to change, especially in government agencies where everybody's told you can never say anything. People should even come over and tell us what they do, because this very, very valuable information, just like it appears and disappears at the same time, because no ear is actually listening. So if you have the opportunity to get this and you're an IBC official, share this information, because we want to engage IBC now and moving forward. With or without the August 9th elections, IBC should be a stakeholder in the diaspora. Like Ali said, a referendum may be in the offing. Why should we wait until the referendum is around the corner and then start talking about voter registration? No, these conversations ought to continue. In terms of accountability, I'll put it this way. It's very hard to hold a government accountable, but let them use this moment to actually share with us basic stuff. We have allotted $300,000 for the diaspora. This is what we plan to use it for, accommodation, blah, blah, blah. And they engage the stakeholders who are the diaspora. And people will tell you, okay, that money is not going to get you anywhere, or that is too much money, or whatever. We've had this kind of conversation with the embassy in Washington, because they've realized the value of engaging. And in the process, we end up making very, very decisive, constructive decisions. So that is really my point, that let's engage each other. There's nothing that is impossible. We are allowed to dream if there's such a thing, because anyway, countries that can vote electronically started like a dream. There are people who say it will never happen. Yes, we know that even in Kenya, our own citizens are having a problem to vote. Honestly, I have been involved two of the last general elections. I was in Kenya in 2013 and I was in Kenya in 2017. And it's true that voting in Kenya is still delusional to a lot of people, simply because they never know who actually won and who lost based on their vote. We have very crude politicians who go by people's IDs and throw them away because so many things. So excuse me, there is a lot that can be accomplished. So my hope is that let's be engaged and let's take the good from the bad. We can get very good results.
Yeah, and
Okay,
Don,
awesome.
before
Yeah,
you,
Ali,
Don,
go ahead.
before
Yeah.
you close, Don, before you close, like I just want to close with a quote from the great artist Kalamashaka. This is to the diaspora. Kalamashaka said, watu walipojikaza kwenye vitanda mlijilaza. You don't want to be among those people ambaye alijilaza kwa kitanda when people were out here fighting. Remember something, the people that came before us, like for today we brag with dual citizenship, like it was always there. But there are people who, like spent their hard-earned dollars, there are people who lost their jobs in this fight, there are people who, and they had nothing. They had absolutely nothing, and they did this for us. Some of them did not even get the benefit. Some of them did not live to see the benefits of what they fought for, like in the new constitution. So we also have to understand that we're never going to be dealt, like anything simple. We're never going to be dealt anything simple. We have to come out. If you have to travel, if you have, just consider it a sacrifice. Yes, this is not, it's not ideal. It's not the way we want it. But if we throw our hands and give up, we're going to give the power to the other people. And another point that keeps coming up is that even if I register, the election is going to be rigged. Think about this. Our parents and grandparents went to register under Moi's regime, like where rigging was, the order was high level rigging, like where it was not even possible to see light at the end of the tunnel, but they still did it. Let me tell you something, even if the elections are rigged, there's only so much rigging that they can do. If you overwhelm them, even that rigging will not be enough for them to do what you want them to do. So sitting back, especially if you have an opportunity, this is mostly for the people who live close to these embassies and consulates. Sitting back and not doing anything is also a choice that you're making. And you're making a choice for the people you don't want. That's exactly what you're doing. So tafadhalini tunawaomba, the last 4 or 5 days that are left, I think the deadline is the 4th of February in the diaspora. It's the 6th in Kenya. So if you're listening from Kenya, you can register up to the 6th. So just go ahead and do it. We are gonna keep fighting. We'll try to get another window opened. There's no guarantees of anything. And even if it doesn't work in this election, just remember, you're hearing this for the first time. There's very likely a referendum that's coming up. And this referendum is gonna touch on diaspora issues. Remember, diasporans right now, we can't have our own representative because the constitution doesn't allow someone with dual citizenship to vie for office. These are some of the things that are gonna be addressed. And if you took a look at the report that was released by the Central Bank of Kenya, like a couple of weeks ago on diaspora remittances, I think about 20% goes towards education and medical expenses. That's a lot of money that's coming out of your pocket on something that the government should be doing. So you voting will be making a difference in your own pocketbook. The average that an American sends, a Kenyan American sends to Kenya is about $15,000 a year. You think about what you can do with, I know what I can do with $15,000 a year, and I know there are people who send much more than that. Just think about it. Done.
Symon, go ahead.
I just have a call for action, and this can begin right this very minute. I have done advocacy for the state of Illinois in Washington, D.C., and this is a grassroots effort. Every year I used to take a group of international educators to go and advocate on issues that affect international students in the U.S. Congress, from the state Senate, from the state the U.S. representatives to the senators on issues of importance. So I would ask Kenyans in the diaspora, go to the Kenya Embassy website. There is an email that you can actually write directly, and I know that the ambassador reads it. Request that you be allowed to register as voters using a national ID. I think that is the constitutional way to do it, but these voices must be heard from all quarters. Don't call, email, because you'll have a copy that you did make that request. So if you guys can overwhelm the embassy with that, embassy will pan the same energy back to IBC and be able to get this second effort to actually, even if it requires legislation, there's nothing more powerful, if you've not lived in this country long enough to understand, than advocacy. Let's begin it from Washington. Let's begin it with New York, LA. And if you're in North America, go ahead. Vancouver, go ahead. People need to wake up. These efforts will bear fruits, but they must begin with you and me and everybody else, that it is indeed urgent that this be given. I mean, what better place could you be to learn about the power of history? Look at the fight the African Americans have put forward to be where they are. And the fight is not over. It's ongoing. So I'm not saying I'm doing comparisons, but there is an effort that you have to look at to be inspired, and you're in the right place. So if you're in this country, you haven't participated in the country's politics, whatever that you do in this country, then the closest you have to do and participate in Kenya is to start this effort. So write an email to the ambassador and request to vote with your ID, and then that means that they have to accept any form of government issued ID. I know some people have old IDs. You come up with any form of Kenyan issued ID, you should be able to be allowed to vote, to register to vote. Whether people vote in August or not, but that's an effort that you can actually be secure. Thank you.
All right, folks. And with that, I'm going to put up, as has been requested, the details to vote. So Diaspora Register to Vote location centers, Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, at least here for us stateside. I believe the dates for...
And real quick,
go ahead.
That flyer says 31st. It says
yes, so it's been extended. It's been extended through this Sunday. Is it going through the 5th or through the 4th?
Through this Friday. No, it's Friday.
Through Friday.
Unless
through
there's
Friday.
something new that has happened, but through the embassies in the diaspora, it's through the 4th. The 6th is Kenya. So, right. So people can still go until this Friday to the embassy. So unless IEBC extends it through the weekend, as far as I checked, the last time, like a few hours before we went on air, the last day for registration is Friday the 4th. So pay attention to that. We're still trying to push them to extend it.
Right. And timings at the consulate is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., right? In whichever time zone you're in. So Eastern time zone, obviously, for DC and New York and
time.
Yeah, and same for the rest. So, folks, we are way over time, which is okay. We had a lot of issues to discuss. This was a special Kamkunji session of Conversations with TopDonn. I want to thank Symon Ogeto here from Chicago for joining. Ali Badawy, asante sana. Make sure you check out Ali on the OneMic Show. He broadcasts at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. So make sure you check him out. Check us out this coming Thursday right here on Conversations with TopDonn. I will have Mumbi Baskin from Africa Fusion Restaurant here, as well as Elias Mati from Jumbo Grill in Kansas City, discussing business ownership in the diaspora. And then make sure you share this link. We need that feedback. The feedback the feedback that you will provide is actually going to be collated and is going to be sent back to IEBC. So the show is actually yours. It's that's why we encourage viewer participation and get comments and be interactive. And we were very interactive today. So thank you very much for watching. And with that, I want to say thank you. I'll see you over here on Thursday. Thank you to our guests for joining, and God bless.